I think you're really going to love this conversation with Holly Whitaker. She's the founder of Hip Sobriety School, and she's going to share with us what goes on inside those doors. And we're also going to delve into her story and the time where she decided to go ahead and quit drinking for good and where her life has landed her now. So I can't wait. Buckle up. Let's go for a ride with Holly Whitaker.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people. People who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
Holly Whitaker, I have been looking forward to this conversation all week. I can't wait to unpack a little bit more about the work that you do. So welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yay. Awesome. So you run Hip Sobriety School, and I want to know all about it. I want you to explain what it is, who it's for, and what the experience is of attending Hip Sobriety School. So let's get started. What is Hip Sobriety School?
Yeah, well, I would say that a little background, I think, is in order just to explain how it came to be. But for me, when I quit drinking, it was 2000. I started on my path in 2012, and it started with reading a book. And then it blossomed into its own thing. I personally I knew that I had to quit drinking. I also knew that AA was not something that I was going to do. I didn't identify as an alcoholic. I felt that it was the last place I wanted to end up. So for me, it was a matter of having to piece together something, doing my own research and piecing together my own path. And what I did, which was a lot of things, what I did for myself ended in giving me, I stopped drinking permanently in April of 2013. And then shortly after that, I stopped binging and purging. I dealt with bulimia since I was 18. So it was, nearly 20 years. Shortly after that, I stopped doing all recreational drugs. I was a daily pot smoker up until 2014. And not only that, what I had pieced together for myself outside of these traditional recovery paradigms was something that it didn't just work on multiple things. It also made me very happy. I ended up going and becoming a yoga teacher after years of saying I was going to get my yoga certification, my yoga teacher certification. I went out and did it when I was 6 months sober. I started traveling. It just opened up this whole world and all this possibility within my world. And so for me, I would say I started doing what I was doing because, one, I felt that we had it wrong. I felt this wasn't a death sentence. I felt like this is where my life had began. And I wanted to get the message out about what removing this one substance can lead to. And the other thing is I had created a non-traditional path for myself, and it had worked very well. And so Hip Sobriety School came out of an idea of one, wanting to really rewrite the rules that we think are so the rules that are so ingrained that it has to be, that it has to be suffering, that it has to be this thing that we battle for the rest of our lives, that this thing that we, that we
That we're
have to
powerless
manage,
Mm-hmm.
right? The powerlessness. There was all this stuff. There was all this, there was all these ideas that are really oppressive, and that actually, when I encountered them, made me feel sicker. And I had done a lot of the opposite of what the traditional rhetoric tells you to do, or the traditional programs tell you to do. And that had actually led to what I felt was my success. And so Hip Sobriety School grew out of me figuring out what had worked for me in terms of thought systems, in terms of tools, in terms of practices, and codifying that, putting that into something that was replicable, that other people could move through, and then testing it out. So it started in 2015, and it was I mean, I had left my job in 2014. I was a director at a healthcare startup. And I jumped in. I had never, I started writing. I'd never written anything besides emails before. I started, started podcasting. I started to do all these really creative things that weren't making me a lot of money and that hadn't really turned what I was doing into a business venture. And honestly, I quit my job in 2014, and 2015 is when, like May 2015 was when I started this. I was seeing one-on-one clients and doing sobriety coaching at the time, but I wanted to create something in my mind when I had left my job. The reason I had left it was to create a different way for not just quitting drinking, but having better lives. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of my Hail Mary. I put together an 8-week program for 13 women that I ran from May until the 4th of July in 2015. And it was just, I emailed them every day and gave them mantras to practice. We were in community together on Facebook. We would come together on Zoom calls and just sit and process. And then every week I would deliver them, a lecture, just more than anything, showing them, like helping them to understand how to become agents, really like very similar to what you're doing, giving people the ability to use, education and practical, and to actually practice things in order to become agents of their own paths. Meaning, the main thing that I did and that Hip Sobriety School did in its first iteration in 2015 was to really empower people to move through their own evolution, give them the tools and the information and the community, and the practices in order for them to at least get started on a path. I never ever have sold anything that guarantees sobriety, but what I have sold is something that just gives people a way in and a way to meet them where they're at and to carry them through. And so this is 2015. I did it with 13 women. I did it by myself. It was exhausting. It was very hard. And I didn't come back to doing it again until 2016. And I ran the second school. And this time I did it with I think 111 people in early 2016, January and February 2016. And really push this, I tried to push it into being something that was much larger, meaning like something that could scale. And it worked. And I did it again, a few months after that with 170 people. And that didn't work very well. There's too many people. And so it's just been this evolution of taking this idea that if we pair community and knowledge and practice, as well as a really empowering framework and really put the experiencer, the person that's dealing with addiction, really put them at the center. Typically we put programs at the center. We say, you work this program. If you do these things, then you'll be fine. We try and fit all these people into paradigms that doesn't take into account their individuality and where they came from. AA, for example, it's an incredibly masculine formula. It was created by men and that's fine, but it was created by men with the idea of men in mind in the 30s. And, here we are, we're 80 years later, and things have changed dramatically, right? Like dramatically. Women had just gotten the right to vote, 20 years before it was came to be. And attitudes towards women and attitudes towards what makes people well. And it was very, very different. And a lot of that hasn't evolved to take into account who we are as humans today. And so, for me, just very simply, like confronting some of the paradigms that existed, I felt were just we're just actually recreating a lot of the stuff that made me sick to begin with. And so I wanted to create something where I put the individual at the center and gave them the agency to move through, and also gave them the trust. A lot of people that come into addiction recovery, are told they shouldn't trust themselves. Like addict, liar, junkie, you can't be trusted, you're weak, all this stuff that we tell people they are when they struggle with addiction. And I don't believe that. I do believe that there has to be framework. I do believe some people have to start with tighter frameworks, but I don't think that there's any benefit to taking somebody who is sick and already coming into it feeling highly disempowered and telling them not to trust themselves. I think we do the opposite, and we tell them to trust themselves and to trust that if something feels right, to continue with it. If something doesn't feel right, it's okay to move away from it. So
yeah, I love it. I love the sounds of it. So I want to dig in a little bit deeper. Can you share a little bit of what is the experience of going through Hip Sobriety School? If I'm somebody that decides to, enter my name and information to get more access, what happens next?
Well, I mean, we always kick it off with doing some sort of like webinar, some sort of training that gives people at least an idea of the style that we teach. But I would say like to kind of break it down, coming into it, the first thing is to understand that we're not necessarily just talking with people that are severely addicted, though, like individuals come into this that have been through rehabs multiple times and that are really absolutely struggling. But we also really open this up as we don't use any labels. And so we open this up into an idea of presenting it to anybody, no matter where they're at on their path and their journey. Meaning that we open it up to people that might, there's a statistic, and I've never been able to track down its origin, but that it takes about an average of 7 years between the time somebody starts to consider whether or not they have a problem with addiction to the time that they actually receive, that they actually actively seek and engage in help. Mm-hmm. And this is a really smart example of this is Annie Grace talks about how 6 years before she stopped drinking, she talked to one of her girlfriends who was an alcoholic in AA, and Annie said, "Hey, I'm worried about my drinking. What is an alcoholic?" And her friend, explained to her what her drinking was like, and then listened to what Annie's drinking was like and said, "Oh, you're fine." And so a lot of times, like, even though it was rubbing Annie 6 years before she stops drinking, she is looking, there's all this proof that tells her, there's all this confirmation bias that tells her she doesn't need to worry. And that's what most of us encountered. What the way that Hip Sobriety School is set up is in order to give people the ability, even when they have that rub, to not have to necessarily classify it or qualify it, but just to say, something doesn't feel right here. I want to explore my relationship with alcohol. So meaning that we open our doors to a wide spectrum of individuals that are at different, stages with confronting what their relationship is with drinking. And that's it. We're just basically like set out to create the space, a safe space for people to encounter their relationship with drinking. And so when people enter the school, there's usually some sort of information that goes out before they sign up. Right now, we only deliver it 3 times a year. We just raised money in order to scale it so that we can become more like a digital, a digital therapeutic, more like an online ongoing recovery, meaning that at any point somebody can join this. But right now it's set up for 3 times a year. People come into it. Our next school is, as of today, which is March 12th, our next school is coming online in the first week of April. And so the idea is people encounter this education, they decide whether or not they want to be part of it. There's a ton of information on a website called thehipsobrietyproject.com that will list out all the FAQs and all of the components of it. But once they have come into contact, signed up for it, they're brought into community. The community is run by teaching assistants, people that have come through the program and then come back through the program and then come back through the program. We've now hired to come back and hold space in the program. So they come into community and the space is held by people that have been through the program before. And then, so together, and the beauty of this is that when people come together, we have this really wide spectrum of experiences and stages. And so people can come into this, either still drinking or not even sure they want to quit drinking, all the way up through people that have been sober for a couple of years. And this just gives this beautiful perspective, I think, for some of us who have quit drinking and are far along in our path, to remember what it was like, and also to remember how much we've learned and how much has come from that. And also to have empathy and sympathy for people that are at the beginning of this, because I think a lot of times we forget. I think a lot of times we can quickly move over to this, like, drinking is awful, and have all these ideas about people that drink. And so it gives us this, like, ability to kind of, like, resensitize ourselves to the beginning of it. And at the same time, it gives people that are just coming into this the ability to see, other people that are at different levels. And so we come into community. The space is held by what we call teaching assistants, because it's a school. And then over an 8-week period, there is a series of lectures that just of information that builds on of itself, right? So we talk out, really simply by defining what addiction is, what the different, like, models of addiction are, like the disease model, the choice model. And then we start to explain how, like, what happens to your brain after you've been drinking. We start to explain how habit is formed, what willpower is. And then we start to evolve into explaining what rituals are and how those help us. We help our students create recovery maps so they can really, again, become agents of their own care. And over time, we start building in this into yoga and nutrition and lifestyle and meditation and trauma, how to find a therapist. And so the idea is that over 8 weeks, you're exposed to this progressive understanding of the ecosystem, because it is an ecosystem of addiction. And you're able to piece together a path that really fits for you. And you do this in community. And then also every day, another part of this is our shifts in thinking. And so every day we're sending an email with some sort of mind meditation, some sort of mantra to repeat. Because shifts in perception and shifts in our thinking are really important. My cat's attacking me, sorry. And so it's just a matter of, like, over 8 weeks in community, learning, putting some things into practice, and then also, like, just being, like, opening ourselves to new experiences. And so people that come through the school, some people come in and they're like, I'm going to quit on day one. And they quit on day one, and it's not always linear. It's never linear, but, like, that is some people's trajectory, is that's it. That's their point for them. And then they don't drink again, or they stumble and they drink again, but their day one is the first day of the course. And people come into the course and their first day, like, they don't quit drinking until months after, because it was just the first exposure to them, to get them, like, it's just such a slow, beautiful unfolding process. And so the point of the school is not to just get people sober. The point of the school is to, like, 100% expose people to a really radical idea that they're in control of their lives, and also that they get to choose their path and take their time to do it, and that they'll be loved and respected, no matter where they are or what they do or what it looks like. And so it's not just, like, this training ground to quit drinking. It's also this training ground to become more tolerant humans, to be in community, to treat each other with respect, to respect each other's different positions. With people that have been through AA and they're actively involved in AA. We have people that come in that were, like, absolutely against AA that end up going into AA, people that come out, so there's people that do refuge recovery specifically. There's people, we're not, there's so many different paradigms that have to be explored and incorporated. There's no one path that looks the same. And I think one of the things that we really do the best is actually respect each other and each other's decisions.
Well, judging from the testimonials that I've read and heard from people that have come through your school, they are overwhelmingly positive. People that have truly gone on to change their lives because they had that opportunity to take a look within and to work with someone like you and the other people that they're connected with in the program. I think that what you're doing is incredible. You are changing lives. You are improving people's lives from the ground up. And like you said, it doesn't matter if people come in with having had any experience in AA or in Smart Recovery or Refuge or whatever, or nothing. They're still drinking. They just want to maybe stop on day one, or maybe they take their time and work through, and on day 15 they decide to stop. It doesn't matter. I love what I'm hearing, that you really meet people where they are and provide for them the community and the tools and the platform for them to really go on and improve their lives in all the ways. Because I think that was so important when I first got sober. It was about, for me, cutting off this one thing and then just doing my whole life, differently. And it worked, and it served me in that way. But at the same time, I really kind of ignored all of what was underlying the addiction in the first place. And I didn't really explore it. And I wish that I wish you'd been around then, And I think for me too, the AA model just did not speak to me. So it was something that I just chose not to do. And so I just sort of shut the door on all things recovery for so long. And I think for anyone watching and listening right now, that's what this whole project, Sobriety Starts Here is supposed to be, where it's opening us up to show all of the different options that are out there. And there's got to be something that's going to resonate. So certainly I want you to check out Hip Sobriety School. You find it at hipsobrietyproject.com. Is that right?
We can find it at hipsobriety.com, or you can find it at thehipsobrietyproject.com. So my website is hipsobriety.com, and then the website to buy the school is, just go to hipsobriety.com. There's another important piece of this too. We're going to be renaming and rebranding in this coming year, and I can't say the name yet, though we have it. But it's not this, there will always be redirects, but just, it won't always be called Hip Sobriety School.
Okay, so where I want to go from here, I became introduced to you, a few years ago now, and the article that you wrote that really stood out for me was the one that you wrote about I'm not an alcoholic and nobody is. And I would wonder if you could spend a few minutes just sharing with everybody watching right now why it is that you don't connect with the label alcoholic. And I'll just share for me, I mentioned that I 16 years ago quit drinking, pretended it wasn't even a thing, just went on with my life, amputating this one part of myself. And when I finally started speaking out and sharing the truth of my story back in 2014, 2015, when I launched my blog, that was the first time I used the word alcoholic out loud to the world. And it felt so empowering for me. It felt so important for me to use that word, to adopt that label, and to feel like, for me, it was like a fuck you, I'm an alcoholic, so fuck you. I felt like it that way, where it felt almost venomous to use that word. And it felt big and bold and scary as hell, but really empowering. And when I read your article, it really kind of turned all of those feelings on their head, and it made me redefine what I think about the term. And it actually has really shifted me into not using it so often anymore. I still do from time to time, but typically I more so use words like sober, in recovery. I don't use the term alcoholic or addict nearly the way that I used to, and I don't look at it the same way as I used to. So I wondered if you can touch on it, because it was such a huge, I think, turning point in your life when you wrote that piece and when you got so much feedback. So if you can share a little bit about your thoughts on why you resist the term alcoholic.
Yeah, I think it's such a great setup from you, because I felt the same way. I didn't absorb the label at first. I didn't identify. I read a book that said there's no such thing as an alcoholic. Alan Carr is the father of this thought. Just to be clear, because a lot of people say this stuff now, it came from this one man in England who was bold enough to say that we've got it wrong. And it was the first book I encountered actually on addiction. And that changed everything for me. So I didn't identify about it. And then and I didn't drink for 2 months, and I drank again. And I think that there is, when we come into it from that approach, like the Annie Grace approach, the Alan Carr approach, the Craig Beck or Jason Vale, those are all four people that really look at it this way. I think that sometimes what can happen is that we undermine the significance of what it is to quit drinking. And we don't do that the work underneath. And for me, I had to get really serious about it. And, I stopped drinking in 2012. I started drinking again towards the end of 2012. I stopped drinking. And then in 2013, I really engaged with my, my recovery from with getting well. And when I stopped drinking for good in April 2013, I had this moment where it felt so precious and precarious. And I was terrified of drinking again. And I would have done anything to not drink again. And I went to a meeting. I went to AA meetings when I stopped drinking the second time. So 6 months into my whole process, I went to AA meetings for the first time. And I took on the label, and then it became that same thing. I just remember being like, fuck you, I'm an alcoholic. Don't offer me a fucking drink. And it did feel incredibly subversive. And it felt, I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking about one of the first times when I was how that felt in that newness. I remember being in New York in July of 2013 and going to bars with my old friends, and I'd spent a lot of time in New York, and I'd gotten drunk in New York a lot. And then I was going to see my friend Maya do, I don't know, spoken word or something. I just remember doing it at a bar, and that newness and that freshness of it, and being the alcoholic. And I actually liked that. Like, I did like that. But the reasons it didn't always carry that weight. It started to carry a different weight. And when I also would call myself an addict. If I'm calling myself an alcoholic, I'm going to call myself an addict. And it was pointed out to me, and rightly, that when I would say addict, I would say addict. And it's a painful word. It's a label. It's something that you always are. And so to me, it was just, there was something that was, because of all that's tied into it, it did make me shrink. And the piece I wrote about not being an alcoholic was because it was interesting. My trajectory had been, at first, I wasn't going to absorb it. I wasn't going to take the label on. Then I took the label on, and I was afraid of what it meant to take the label on. And then when I ditched it, I was afraid of what it meant to ditch it, and what other people would say, and how that would come across. But the piece just basically points out, we don't have tobaccoholics, right? Like, we don't have people that quit smoking and are still, addicts. They quit smoking. Right. And we do. And with a lot of other things, like, we've come up with a unique disease to impress upon a minority of people that struggle with a known carcinogenic neurotoxin, a known addictive substance. And so it just in its nature, just to start by saying, I'm a person that's allergic to alcoholic. I'm one of those few people that can't drink. What we're doing is saying everyone else should be able to ingest the same thing that we put in our cars. Everyone else should be able to ingest the same thing that we sterilize medical equipment with. I mean, this thing that we put into our bodies, and we live in this culture that's so aware of everything we put into our body, we think it's normal. We think it's not normal to ingest, pesticides on our produce. We think it's not normal to ingest, tap water. We think it's not normal to ingest, God, why can't I think of, cow meat. That's like soy. I mean, there's so many things we think we're not supposed to ingest, but we are supposed to ingest alcohol and anybody else, and an addictive substance, by the way, a highly addictive substance, and anybody else that can't. Well, there's something wrong with them. And so what it does is it puts for me, there was so much wrong with this, because when I was saying I was an alcoholic, people that really truly are struggling, like, it's such a barrier to people. They think, like, it really, like, when you go through like NCAD's checklist and you do I qualify as an alcoholic? Well, there's so many things that you have to be to really identify as in-spectrum addiction. And what we end up doing is looking, we're asking ourselves, am I an alcoholic? Am I not an alcoholic? And that's the only qualifier to do something, which is like waiting until we're having a heart attack to ask whether or not maybe we should, do something about our hearts, or waiting until we have diabetes to do something about our diet, or waiting until, we have some far end disease before actually looking at whether or not, we should do something about it. And so, I could go on and on and on, but one, like the points in that article are that it's not that people evolve through it. It's not this thing. I personally don't think about alcohol. It's not this thing that I struggle with every day. People evolve through it. I'm not one drink away from being a drunk. Mm-hmm. I'm not like, I'm not in the situation that I have to monitor and manage like chronic diabetes for the rest of my life. I just don't fucking drink. Like, that's it. That's actually the end of the story for me. And this is not a rare, like one-off case. I am representative of most of the people that I know that are sober. It is a struggle to be awake and alive in this world. That's right. It is a struggle to feel the weight of the world and the pain and all of that without having numbing agents. But at the same time, most people that I know that don't drink aren't walking around, like managing their alcoholism. They're just not drinking. And, and there's so many pieces to it. It's a great article. You should read it. But like, it is a great article.
I have read it. I highly recommend it. But I want to say, so when you say most of the people do you mean most of the people that you're personally connected with who have come through your program, or that, sort of adopt the same philosophy as you? Because I think by and large, the attitude is the opposite of that, it is a struggle. It is really hard. You do have to every day you have to make sure you hit your meetings, or you do all of the work that you need to do. Like, I think there's a blend of both of those things, because I think even with your work, there are things that need to be done on a daily basis. Meditation, I know you're big on yoga, I know you're big on nutrition and movement and all of those things. So is it just that we turn it around to being more positive in our lives, positive behaviors that we bestow? Like, what's the difference?
That's such a great point. Right. I think the difference is thinking like that we have to be vigilant of alcohol and our alcoholism. Like that basically keeps alcohol in our purview, and it keeps us focused on the alcohol and focused on this. It gives a lot of power to one substance, right? Mm-hmm. Versus like having non-negotiables, things that we actually keep in our lives, keeping healthy. Like for me, of course I have to keep on my path, right? But I have to keep on my path, not just to not drink, but also to not be mean, to also not deal with severe anxiety, to also not deal with depression, to also, like, for me, the path is, it's not, of course it's prevention. And of course it's prevention of having to use other things to manage myself and other things to cope. But for the most part, my path is leveraging tools that just make me a healthier and happier and more present, evolving human. Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of us, I think that the alcohol is most easily explained as the hook. Like the problem with the alcohol is just the thing, like I'm on a path that all humans are on, right? And that all humans should be on, right? Like every human should be subject to some sort of recovery protocol just because of what it entails and what it means. But alcohol for some of us is the hook. It's the thing that nails us, the thing that is so painful we can't ignore it, the thing we actually have to do something about. Otherwise we die. And so it brings us into it. It's like this invitation into actually, feeling our feelings, living our life, processing our pain, processing our trauma, dealing with our relationships, understand, like knowing our body. When you're drinking, you can't like listen to your body, right? Like you can't hear it. And so there is this, for me, alcohol is the hook. It's the thing that actually got my attention and made me start doing the work. But the work is the work. It's the work it's the work that's been talked about through the ages by different sages and different, like, the ascended masters of the work that all of us have to do, which is to get right with ourselves, to be able to live in this world and to not use, we weren't created to use, highly toxic coping mechanisms to make it, from one end of our life, to the other. Mm-hmm. We were created to experience the world and all of it. And to move through that, and to evolve through that. Mm-hmm. And when we use a substance to manage getting from, 0 to 99, we aren't doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so beautifully put. And I love that you touched on that you used alcohol. You also used pot. You used binging and purging. These are all ways that you used to escape, to numb, to push down. And I wonder, I know that we don't have a ton of time together. I wish we had more, but I was wondering if you can walk us through a little bit, sort of the trajectory of your story up into where you're now teaching at Hip Sobriety School.
I know. But starting from like where?
From childhood, if we can even fast track through if we need to, but just kind of giving us sort of a picture of how it all kind of came up into your life, these different tools or vices that you use throughout your life.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think my parents got divorced when I was 14. I was a straight A student. I always had a ton of energy, and I was always I was always too much to handle, and I always had too much energy. And I had started diet. I used diet pills when I was 10. I mean, I got like, I had my shit. I knew from a young age, I hated my body, that kind of thing. But I was 14 when my parents got divorced. When I was 15, my dad came out gay. My mom went back to work. My dad, disappeared. And I had a very, what I would call a very typical coming of age experience in America, or the Western world, right? Where the family breaks up, the kid is alone, and, and not even a typical, like, I had a privileged life, let's be honest. Like I didn't live in poverty. We always had enough. I never knew what it meant to be hungry. I have to be really clear on that. But I had a very, let's say, middle-class privileged coming of age. And when I was 15, that was just it. I turned into, I started drinking at that age. I started smoking pot at that age. I started ditching school at that age. I really, I had been a crazy good student up until then. I barely graduated high school. I got incredibly, I didn't have healthy relationships with men at all. I gave a lot. I don't know if I can say this, you can edit it out, but I sucked a lot of dick. I went into this mode where I was using alcohol, cigarettes, and pot to manage myself starting at age 15. And my relationships with men were built on this idea that I had to give something to them for them to want me, or to want to have anything to do with me. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I graduated from high school, I went to school, I went away with my friends, and that was really where my anorexia came online when I was 17. I dropped a ton of weight, and then that was hard to manage, especially when I was getting drunk, and especially when I was smoking pot, because you lose your inhibitions and you get the munchies. And so I was cycling through, my weight was just off the charts, up and down. And I got, I tangled up with antidepressants around then. And then my life kind of fell apart. I was living in San Luis Obispo. My life fell apart. I had to move back home with my mom, and I had to pull my grades up. I'd gotten Fs in college. And so I went to my community college. I pulled my grades back up, and I went to school at UC Santa Cruz, and I got a job with a Big Four accounting firm. I kicked ass in school. I kicked ass from there on out. I had a stable boyfriend. I had a job right after college, but my life but I was never happy. It's just so hard to explain that. I had panic attacks. I found yoga. I had this trajectory, and I remember this, and I think this is the way to sum it all up, is I remember when I was 16, I was driving with my friend Christy, and I said, do you ever just feel like life is pointless? Do you ever just, I had struggled with depression. I had struggled with depression since I could remember. I knew something was wrong with me since I could remember. But I remember asking Christy if she just ever felt like life was pointless. And she was like, nope, never. And I used that as the way to understand that there was just something wrong with me, and that everyone else is fine. Mm-hmm. And that I was alone in this feeling of pointlessness, the absolute fucking pointlessness of life. Mm-hmm. And so, I would say there's so much to talk about when we talk about how we come into this stuff. From 23, when I started my career, 24 to the time I moved to San Francisco, my drinking was what I would call normal. I binge drank on the weekends. There were times when I broke up with my boyfriend, I remember taking 3 shots of vodka by myself one night, and that was really terrifying. I didn't, it was never this thing I had to do. My relationship with pot was always present, but it was pot, it wasn't killing me. And I was depressed, and I moved to San Francisco, and I got a life that was very alcohol centric. A typical night and a normal night for my friends, and I was going to 3 happy hours, meaning I would go with my friends after work to my work happy hour. Then I would meet this other friend at her happy hour. Then I would cap the night off by going to see a band and drinking. Or we'd go out for meals, and the meals were 7-course meals paired with wine. My alcohol budget was $1,000. My going out budget and eating was $1,000 a month. And we would wine taste, and there was just this, and for me that wasn't even the problem. I would still like, I would still not drink for periods of time. When it became a problem was when I was living with a boyfriend and we broke up, and that was it. Like, I felt like my life was over. I felt like all I had was my career. I was working a ton, and I just managed it with alcohol. And that was really like, it was never this like really fucked up thing. I had struggled with alcohol in the ways that I could see my other friends struggling with alcohol. There were times for sure that I would do things that were questionable, like drinking by myself. But I was very aware of the potential for it to go off the rails. And so I would
in those
say,
moments that you were drinking alone, or in those moments where you were like questioning, was it enough for you to get quiet and kind of go deeper and say the words to yourself, there's a problem here that I need to address? Or did you just keep pushing it away?
I just felt, and I think this is a really typical feeling, I felt like if I just did more yoga, if I just ate, like I always felt like the solution was just was so close, that it was never about being an alcoholic. I mean, that was the fear. The fear was that I could lose my privilege to drink, right?
Yes.
But the fear was never that I was like, you know what I mean? I would have never gone that deep to confront that. And my journal entries would reflect, my relationships would reflect that it was only a matter of going to the gym more. It was only a matter of eating better. It was only a matter of, getting certain things and achieving certain things in order to and then it wouldn't be this bad. It was just, I just need to drink a little bit less. Maybe I'll not drink on Thursdays and Fridays. Maybe I'll only drink 2, you know what I mean? I had stories of I remember going out and I started putting, mixing my I started drinking champagne and mixing it with club soda. So I didn't have to work, you know what I mean? There were all these schemes I had in order to manage something that I thought would be resolved by either more money, a husband, a better job, more yoga. And I think it's a very typical thing to think that if we just do these, we just need to, change some things a little bit and get a little bit more control over it. And for me, what had to happen was I had to actually go back, go from the bottom up, meaning I had to kind of start at the very bottom of it and come into it. And the funny thing is that my yoga practice that I always wanted, and my healthy financial life that I always wanted, and my healthy relationships, they came from not just doing them, but actually from kind of letting the system collapse and then, and starting at the bottom and doing the work to going through it, right. Was how I got the things that I had eluded me for years. Cause that's what we think. We think more yoga makes us happy. Green juice makes us happy. If we just eat, people that eat better, that eat well and have good finances and have good jobs and go to bed on time and do, you know what I mean? Those people are happy. And so if we just could be more like those people, then, if we just do these things, then we'll be okay.
It's so true. It's such a common way of thinking. It's such misinformed thinking, because we believe that it's always that next thing, that one thing around the corner, that's going to be the thing. And we never want to address the thing that it is. Right. And you've nailed it. That's exactly how so many people that are watching and listening feel. And so again, never, ever alone. We all can feel those feelings. So I want to know, can you share what was I know you've talked about it in other places before, but was there a rock bottom, or was there a moment where you were just like, that's it? I know you read Alan Carr's book, but what else happened for you to say, that's it, alcohol is being taken out of my life?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to know I had kept all appearances up, and also slowly, just because I had a really crazy job, I'd been able to use my job to say I wasn't coming out. And so I'd kind of tracked my social life from being out 5 to 7 nights a week to being out no nights a week and to consistently just working. And so there was that cover and that disengagement from community and from people. And then what happened was with my job, I had to work a lot, and the way to power through my job was to basically hold myself up with my laptop and just, essentially spend weekends, go on benders to get it typically was to get a lot of work done. And so I would go on benders. It's very similar to Lisa Smith's book.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny when you were sharing your story about all chasing these other things, it reminded me of in Lisa's book where she says, you know, she got married. Like she went and got married to a guy that she knew deep down wasn't the right relationship, hoping that this marriage and living in this other neighborhood would help her to curb her drinking. So yeah, I definitely see a lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I would go on these benders, and then I would think that if, and then I would clean myself up. I mean, that was it. Like I would, and we're talking like like pot, alcohol, food, like weekends of just balancing those things out, and coffee, you know, and cigarettes, like balancing out this combination of uppers and downers in order to keep me going. And then and it would just be, it was what you could imagine. It was just like, you know, a hole up in my apartment for 3 or 4 days doing that. I'd order food, and I'd order, you know, like I love these alcohol delivery systems that exist now, because if they existed, then I would have been fucking dead. But I would like find the takeout people, because I would get so disgusting. I'd find the takeout people that would bring, you know, food and wine, and I just like ditch the food and drink the wine. And so, but I would go through these periods, and I mean, I knew I smelled so bad. And which is why, like, now when I see other people and I can smell, like, I can just see it in other people like that. Ugh. But this, like, so I went through these periods, but the thing was, I would rebound back. I would wake up and I'd be like, okay, tomorrow. And I'd wake up at 5 and I'd go to the early hot yoga class, and then I'd come back, or like, you know what I mean? I would just be able to like come back in and muscle up. I'd call my house cleaners. I'd clean, you know what I mean? Like I would just clean it all up. I would sanitize it. And then I'd go into the world, never again, never doing this again. Okay. And then like, you know, a week later or 10 days later, I'd find myself in it again. And what ended up finally happening was I woke up one morning, and it was a really like, it was beyond, it was typical at that point, but it was just so, I couldn't deny it. It's hard to explain, but I could not deny it. I was in so much pain. I was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I woke up and I was still drunk, and I had Jameson in my hand, and I was in my bed, and my bed had no sheets, because like I just would go through these periods of time where I would dirty my sheets so bad. And I mean, I bought so many new sets of sheets during these years, like so many new sets of sheets. It's insane, because I would just try and destroy the evidence. I bought new couches, all like things. I would have to constantly replace things because of going through this. And like but I woke up and it was just like there was trash all over my apartment. There were flies. There's like flies that just like kind of like don't really have a pattern. They just go in a circle. There was like a ton of flies in a circle in the middle of my living room, and my cat was there. And I couldn't do it. I had to, it was a weekday, and like everything was just, it was disgusting. And I just did the thing where I dropped to my knees, and I started like, I mean, I screamed like, I need help, like help me. I need help. Like, I can't do this. And because I just couldn't, like the thought of getting up and like cleaning it up again was just impossible. And then I did that, and then I got up and I cleaned it up again. And then I went out in my day, and I just, there was, you know, I mean,
Like
I've
you had to
written
go to
about
work at that point, that day you went into the office?
No, I worked from home that day, but I had like, so I had a meeting to lead, and I went to Starbucks. I like cleaned, you know, I took out the trash. I went to Starbucks to get my bacon Gouda, you know, sandwich and my coffee. But the thing was, I had this moment where that morning I ran into a man. Like that morning I ran into a guy that used to work with me, who had moved from Berkeley to San Francisco that day, and was in the lobby of my apartment, and I was still drunk, and I ran into him, and I had this conversation with him that was just this like, I mean, I've written about it before, but I had this like, it was just the moment I can trace it back to was this moment there, the pivot. And it wasn't when I stopped drinking. It took me months to stop drinking after that, you know, but it was just it was like the end of the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The undoing.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy stuff. I'm so glad that you kind of allowed us to follow along and go with you there. What then after, I know you had, you know, some chances where you tried stopping drinking, and then you went back to alcohol, and then I know you quit pot after that. When was it that you kind of finally got to a place where where it was gone out of your life for good, and that you felt like you were back in control or more in control, or at least knowing why you were doing those behaviors in the first place? Like, do you remember when that kind of happened, where it was like, okay, I get why I'm doing this stuff?
Which thing?
Let's start with drinking.
I mean, I think one of the first pivots was just realizing that drinking was ridiculous. I think a lot of us don't realize how fucking ridiculous it is to drink. And not just the drinking, it serves a purpose. It's self-medication, but it also is like we tie so much social status and like so much of our social life and the way we are in this world to alcohol. It's like this constant companion to everything we do. And I think, so there was the point when I stopped drinking that I was like, I don't want to be part of this stupid fucking drinking culture anymore. There was that. But I don't know if, are you asking me what moment I felt like, if I remember feeling, what?
Like, I guess I'm just trying to get into sort of your mindset when it was finally done. Like when you finally were like, I am on this other path now. Like I'm leaving that behind in a way.
I knew I was leaving it behind starting in that October. I knew it. The 2 days after I had that come to Jesus moment, I had like the come to Jesus moment. That was when I picked up Alan Carr's book. And then I went to a wedding and I was like, oh my God, I'm so done. But then it's this struggle and you forget, and then I had this moment in Austin in April of 2013. It was at a company event. I used to fuck one of my bosses, and we had been in a relationship years before, but like I would get drunk to have sex with him at these events. And I had said I was going to stop on March 31st. I think that was Easter, and I went to the Hunky Jesus contest at like Dolores Park, and then ended up drinking, and I hadn't had a drink since then. And then I went and I did this company event thing, and I knew I was going to drink, and I drank. And then not only did I drink, I did the thing with him where I followed him around, and then I went back to his hotel room, and then we had, sloppy sex. I forgot. And the next morning I woke up in his room and I was just done. I mean, that was it. That was it. I was so hungover, and I didn't want to fuck him anymore, and I didn't want to drink anymore. And that was it for both he and I quit him and the drinking on that day. And that was, and I remember I flew back from Austin. I was on a plane with one of my good friends, and I just there was this cleanliness to this. I don't know how to explain it. It felt clean, and it's not necessarily the right word to use, but for me, I just felt like there was this simplicity and this cleanliness to knowing I was divorcing that part of my life. And that I was happy divorcing that part of my life. And the next day I went to my first meeting, and there was this it felt like sticking to a diet, or like not even sticking to it. It just felt like doing something that for the first time filled me up versus this thing I was just trying to make fit. It felt so right, and I felt like an adult. And I just I was signed on to that, and terrified of losing it, believe me, but signed on to that.
Yeah, I can connect with that feeling of, sort of drawing that line in the sand and then having it feel cleansing almost, just to really believe deep in your bones that is the decision that you're making. Like it's all over. And I think that's a really important to make for people out there that are watching, that are like, I've tried quitting so many times. I've thought about quitting. I've tried moderating. I've tried quitting drinking. I've said I wasn't going to drink, and then I drink again. And it's just the point to be made that it is never, never, never too late. And that time is coming, and that it's not wasted time when we have those moments of clarity, or when we feel like this just isn't working, or, I'm really using this inappropriately, or I'm really fucking my life up. Like, what am I doing with this?
This is what we go through, right? Like do you know anyone, Sarah, that has stopped drinking, that hasn't had that hasn't gone through the drink? I don't know one person.
Nope.
That was just like Annie Grace's dad. That's the only example I can draw from. The guy decided he was going to stop drinking. That was just it.
Yep.
And but I just don't know anybody. That's the part of the process, right?
And I wonder, I mean, we don't know Annie Grace's dad. Like, how many times did he, as he was drinking, think, God, this isn't good. You know, maybe I should really think about what I'm doing here. I mean, who, God only knows, right? Like, we don't know. But yeah, I agree with you. I just think that it's never this perfect, neat process that we all go through. It is iterative. It is, you know, it compounds, it adds, it accentuates each other. Like it enhances every single time you make a new decision. And even if you fall back on it, it doesn't mean you've slid all the way back down. Like you're still farther ahead. So I just think it's always important to be mindful that no matter what, if we're thinking about these things, or if we're curious about what's out there, or how does life look without alcohol, that's, you can keep exploring those thoughts without having to have the fear that you have to put it down right away. But it's okay to keep having those thoughts, because one day it will get to the point where you just don't want to put this toxic substance in your body. And I think it's truly the holy grail is to get to where you are and where the people that come out of your program are, where it really is about not wanting to escape our lives by using this drug or any of these drugs. Like, why not see the beauty in the pain of life and the pleasure of life and all that there is, and really opening our eyes to what's out there, instead of just constantly kind of living in this really insular life. I find it so stifling now when I even am around people who are drinking. I was at Christmas time, I was with a bunch of people, it was an all-inclusive, and everyone's getting drunk, everyone's wasted, and there comes a point where now I can't talk to those people anymore. Like there's just no point to have conversations when people are really under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. And so I just find it becomes almost it can feel almost isolating when all of your friends and all of your life is wrapped up in alcohol or other drugs. And I feel like when you can open up your mind to know that there's so much beauty out there, that there's opportunity for everything. You can be as creative and as big, and you can do as many things as you want to do. It's all out there, but this thing is pulling you down. So I'm curious about that first time that you walked into the AA meeting. So you did that right after that plane ride. And what was it about AA that you liked, and then what you didn't connect with that didn't make you stay?
One thing I want to point out, not everyone that comes through my program is like, you know, like I have to be clear, there is no panacea. It's one way, but I don't want to give any sort of false expectation that it's like a fix all, and that everyone that comes out of it is like reborn. But I do. Okay. So that the thing that didn't fit, I mean, when you read Alan Carr, like it's pretty simple. When you read Alan Carr's book and then you go into an AA meeting, it doesn't wash. The community washed, but I also had a lot of, I didn't like the pressure I got to get a sponsor. I mean, I don't know. I had this very strange feeling, and my experience is I have a feeling that I was, that it didn't take. And I feel like that can be sensed, like that I wasn't in on it. I wasn't buying it. And I feel like that can be sensed, and that felt confrontational. Like being asked that many times, I've seen you coming to meetings. Why haven't you gotten a sponsor yet? You know, like feels just like, fuck that. Like, fuck that. That was just like the exact like reaction I felt. Like, who the fuck are you? I'm coming to meetings. Leave me the fuck alone. It was like, you know, excuse all the S, but like, it's just, that was like, there was just, you know, and then I think hearing again and again and again, like the story of like the reinforcement of the, like, you're only one drink away. And if you don't work the program, if you don't come to meetings, if you don't do this, you're on a dangerous path. You're on a dangerous path. And I had worked so hard to learn to trust myself. I came into this 6 months. I'd gotten myself there by my own volition. No one had come to me and said, you need to stop drinking. Like, let's be clear. I was not forced by anyone else's hand. I was forced by myself into it. I knew what I had to do. And then I come into this program, and then I have people telling me I don't know what's right for me. I don't know how to do it, you know? And like hearing that message of like, don't trust yourself, and get a sponsor. And if you want to keep drinking, you know, use yoga and like stuff like that was just, that was what I didn't need to hear. Mm-hmm. That was the opposite of what I needed to hear. And I didn't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do instead? So you left AA, and what did you do? Did you just start working on your own program just in your own life?
I started in October. I read probably between October and April when I started going to it. I had read, you know, like at least 15 books, if not more. you know, I understood what addiction was on a certain level. I developed a daily meditation practice. I had started practicing A Course in Miracles concepts. I did yoga daily. I was waking up in the mornings and making myself dance and, you know, meditating in the morning. I had Post-it notes all over my apartment. I had a therapist. I was working with doctors that were friends of mine, and you know, like I started doing amino acid therapy. I learned EFT. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but like AA was not, it was something I tried on top of everything I'd already been doing. So there was no, like, it was just that, you know, it was how I was looking for community and structure and just like doing the thing I felt I should do. And I don't regret that I did it. I really feel like it helped me in ways, like even in the ways where it felt like it wasn't helping me, I feel like it helped me.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think many people who at least give AA a chance or other programs, I don't think, again, there's any time wasted. I think there's always some learning to be done, no matter how we put ourselves out there. So I'm curious, I know you've mentioned several of them, yoga, meditation, all sorts of things, nutrition, but what are your favorite tools in your recovery toolbox?
Yeah, meditation, especially Kundalini meditation, breath exercises. So like an example of a Kundalini meditation that has been really helpful to me is the Sudarshan Chakra Kriya that I'm doing right now. I sweat about 4 to 5 times a week, do it like through yoga, usually. Like yesterday I went on a run, but that's pretty rare. I am consistent. I read like voraciously, and a lot of spiritual books. You know, I do a lot of prayer. I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of like repetition of positive thoughts and affirmations. I have, you know, I think like part of it is I've also switched my life up. So I have a lot of meaning in my work. I spend, you know, I've in the last couple of years spent a lot of time, like especially in the last year, I've spent a lot of time making my very introverted self like go out and be around people. I think that's important. Like relationships have been a huge sustaining factor. I surround myself with people that like are in on the secret of, you know, my world, my life. I drink a ton of water. I try and eat healthy. I sleep. Like I typically can't sleep less than 7 hours a night. I take a lot of baths. I use a lot of essential oils. I mean, I could go on, but like the main thing is the thing that works the most is, for me is the meditation. That's the thing.
I love it. I know a lot of people have a hard time thinking about getting themselves into a meditation practice. And I don't know if it was you I was talking to a while back that meditation, you know, yes, it's great if you can sit on a mat and if you can stay there for 20 minutes and it can do wonders. It's been a powerful tool in my own life. But I also know for me, sometimes waiting in line at Starbucks where the guy behind me is coughing and bothering me and just taking those deep breaths and being mindful and in the moment and present and that to me is a form of meditation. So I find that sometimes we set it up where we have to have the perfect cushion and the right lighting and the candles and everything in the altar. But we can also find those moments within just regular daily life to take a moment to be, you know, to have some gratitude and to have some peace in moments that might otherwise be triggering or frustrating or just annoying.
Yeah. I typically meditate in my bed. It's, you know, and I think I have since the beginning. I have a cushion and I've tried to do the accoutrement, but I prefer just a simple act of, you know, being in my PJs in my bed and doing meditation.
I love it. So you wake up in the morning and then you will just go into a meditation, or do you go back to your bed later? Just curious.
No. I wake up and I typically read and practice Italian and drink like coffee and espresso and then I do my meditation, and then at night, and like sometimes I do it during the day too. I mean, I'm not a really consistent person. I consistently do like I'm committed. I'm not consistent, if that makes sense. I'm committed to showing up again and again and again and doing the things that I know are helpful to me, but I'm not a very consistent person. I'm a very distracted person.
Well, you have a lot going on. You're a busy lady, and the work that you're doing in the world is amazing. I want to know just a couple last questions for you. What is the best thing for you about being sober?
Not ever having to drink again.
I love that so much. I love that so much because of the freedom in those words. And I know for a lot of people listening, the fear of never being able to drink again is almost paralyzing. So to know that your favorite thing about being sober is never having to
Never have
drink.
to do that again. Never have to do that again. Never have to deal with that. I've been going to Italy since April of 2000 or July 2013. I never have had a drop of alcohol in Italy. And it's like a point of pride. And it's also like, and the beauty of it, I don't even notice alcohol in Italy. Like, it doesn't even occur to me that people would go to Italy to drink wine, or that like that's part of the experience of being in Italy. We have such a one-dimensional view of how important alcohol is. And when you remove it, you're like, oh my God, there's everything else, you know?
Even though when you're in Italy, they're offering you wine constantly. I mean, from what I hear, and I think you've even mentioned it, that they're often offering you wine with dinner, and you're like, no.
It's not. I mean, I think I'm pretty immune to it at this point that I don't even notice. You know what I mean? Like, I rarely even know. It doesn't make an impact the way it used to make an impact. But
And I just want to interject. I think that's such a key. I think that's such a key point, that in the early days of sobriety, we think we are forever going to feel so completely untethered and so raw and other that everyone's staring at us wondering why we're not drinking. Like, sooner or later, you do get to the point where no one fucking cares what we're doing. Like, really, really, like, yeah, sure, maybe the server's going to know that they won't make as much money if we're not drinking alcohol. Oh, well, in 2 seconds, they're over it. They've moved on. Like,
yeah.
I think that you're so right that we just put all of this pressure on it, and we think that we have to drink because this situation sets itself up that makes us believe that we can't avoid alcohol. I think so many people wouldn't even conceive of going to Italy because they would be so concerned about all of the alcohol use there and the red wine flowing, that they would feel like that would be a place that is off limits to them in early sobriety. And I love that you are shattering that just by your very being.
No, I went with my drinking buddy, and like I went, and his family, who were all like, let's put it this way. He lived in San Francisco. He had a mini cellar in one of his rooms, and he had off-site wine storage. And this was like, and we used to go out and drink Sicilian wines, and like we like in San Francisco, and then he and I and his family went to Sicily. And it was like, it was of course terrifying, the prospect of it, but it got pretty like, but that was, I mean, like maybe like, also there's so much cappuccino and espresso and fizzy water. And so like, it's like a fucking sober person's dream. But like it's just funny. It maybe made an impression for a minute. And then that was that.
And I think that's such a key too. That's such a point to make. And then that was that. It's like, it can be that. It can be the noticing of the trigger or the situation. And then that moment in between where it's the decision that we've made, which is to not reach for that drink or whatever. And then we move on. Like, I do think sometimes we get so hung up with the fear of what those moments are going to feel like and what they're going to look like and how we're going to be perceived. And we shrink away and we hide away and we don't do all the things that we want to do because we're afraid. And I just love that you have such lady balls that I admire so much. You are a woman that I respect, and I followed your work for many years now, and I will continue to do so. Congratulations on all the exciting new things happening with Hip Sobriety School. I'm so proud of you. I know that you are changing more lives than you'll ever be able to even count with what you're doing, although I guess they might be countable, but no, they won't be, because the people that are being healed through your program or that are working towards greater healing are then sharing that and passing on some of what they've learned, just even by being the way that they are in the world, and also sharing what they've learned with others who they love, and that then might come into the program as well. So it's amazing what you're doing, and I really applaud you for all of your hard work. I know it's been years of effort, and it's definitely paid off.
Yeah, well, and I think it's so important just to point this out, that when we speak up, and for anybody listening, when we speak up, when we talk about our own experiences, it just invites the world in, and it's so important. I think that's something that, you know, you've done very well, and that I've done, and many of our friends have done, and is just speak up about this and normalize it, right? And invites everyone else in. But thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And yeah, this has been really fun.
I'm so glad. I was so happy to have you come on. When you said that your schedule was too busy, I wondered, oh no, is she going to be able to? And you're like, but next week's okay. And I'm like, yes, yay. That was awesome. I have one last question for you. Holly
Yeah.
Whitaker, I'm going to steal it from Oprah. What do you know for sure?
That we're supposed to struggle in the way, like that we're supposed to struggle, like that we're supposed, like, not that life is a struggle, not that every piece of this, because we can be peaceful in the struggle. We can actually have peace while we're going through it, but that we are meant to, that no one's doled out something that they can't overcome, that what we're given is the thing that we're meant to confront, and the thing we're meant to burn through and use. And that this is it's not a fault, it's not a weakness, it's not a curse, an unfairness. It's your thing, it's our thing, it's the thing, right? And that all the challenges that we're meant to face are only the things, they're just the stepping stones to the people that we're meant to become. This is universal. That I know for sure.
I love it. It's a gift.
Such a gift. Yeah.
It's a gift. You're a gift. Thank you, Holly
Thanks,
Whitaker.
Sarah. Thank you.
To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.